See, here's the thing. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that's near and dear to all of us, men, Black men in particular, something we know about. We're experts in that. But our perspective is going to be just talking about Black men and the negative perception of us not being mature, us not being able to grow. That's something that we have struggled with historically. You know, I know for myself, growing up in a single parent household, it was challenging. But the one thing I'd like to say is that we have traditionally, as Black men, been culturally conditioned to be the uncaring, emotionless, tough guy, can't cry, the whole nine. But there are a couple of different things that we have to take into account when we're talking about maturity and growth. For instance, family structure. Is there a family structure bias? I recently came across some information where from 1960 to 2020, there was a study done, all ethnic groups. And what they found was that in single parent households, the numbers grew from 11% to 27%. However, when you extrapolate Black families, that number increased to 44%. So now what we're talking about is most single parent households in our community are headed by women. So, for me, again, that's an experience I have. So I didn't grow up in a nuclear household, so to speak. But Carl, I know you did. So give us your perspective of how you think growing up in a nuclear household, having an attending father there in the household helped you in terms of growing and maturing.
Well, a couple of things I think with that. And again, it comes from, I guess, a time in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up and coming of age. There was a particular way that we were being raised. As you said, Jane, earlier, there wasn't a lot of feeling involved. There wasn't a lot of exploring emotions. Particularly for my father, and not this is a bad thing, but this is what you do, this is who you are, this is how you carry yourself. If there's boys don't cry, stop crying, don't get upset, push through it. I think even from friends that I had growing up, like yourself and others in my neighborhood who were growing up in a single parent household, it's again during that time, their mothers were very pushed through. This is what you have to do. This is where this is how you have to navigate as a man in society. I didn't see from the exterior, I didn't see a lot of difference in maturing levels between myself and my friends who were coming up in a single parent household. I think that doesn't become evident until later on in life for a lot of people. But that was then. Now, I think things have changed a lot because and I'm sure it happened then too, but I know a lot of times now when I come against younger men who have been raised in a single parent household, they have a sense of entitlement because their mother didn't raise them necessarily to mature. They raised them as either their friends or a substitute husband. Because they do have a lot of emotions. And, I don't think they're, again, using the word, I don't think they're necessarily emotionally mature. They're very sensitive in areas that you would say, well, you're not mature because you aren't able to handle rejection, so to speak.
Fair.
You're not, a woman says, well, I'm not interested. And, you see everything from, extreme violent situations to, just saying, well, you ain't all that anyway, and calling her out a name and so forth. And it's like, I don't know who, and you start thinking, well, who raised you? But like I said, it's a different it's a different time. So
And you know what, Carl, I call that the pimp mentality.
mm,
When you have these young men that have been raised by single mothers, young black men, mom is treating them like the boyfriend. Mom is
mhm,
treating them like the husband. Mom is treating them like they the man of the house.
mhm,
Consequently, what happens is she's giving this young man everything he wants. She's giving him everything he wants. So by the time he reaches adulthood and he's dealing with women like a pimp, hey, I'm
mhm,
used to getting everything I want
mhm,
from a woman, whether it's sex, whether it's money, the whole enchilada. So now, to your point, what they face is if a female says no, wait a minute, I'm not used to that.
mhm.
That's not the way I grew up. Oh, you gonna give me what I want. And then there you go. You resort to the violence, the whole gambit. And I think for me, it starts, like they say, charity begins at home, but it all starts at home. So ladies, single black moms, if I can implore upon you, please stop treating your son like he your man. Because we've heard people say, "Oh, that's my husband." That's not your husband. That's your child. And to me, that's one of the factors that leads into these young men not being able to mature at a level that they should be, not being able to grow. So, but the family aspect of it with the family structure and the biases there, Brandon, I'd like you to speak to, how you came up and what your household entailed in terms of you growing and maturing.
Okay. And just to piggyback off what Carl said, I'm a different generation, so of course the dynamics from the single and nuclear were different. Me coming up, so I guess you'd say I was born in the 90s, so my younger years are the 90s and the early 2000s. So that's a different generation and time frame and dynamic from you guys growing up, whether it's a single or nuclear household. So I guess you could say I had the generic nuclear household, two parents, myself and another sibling. So it was the average Joe you see family. And we grew up around a lot of not families like that, where it was either a mom and kids or dad and kids, but there wasn't the nuclear. And you could see very easily, again, me and my sister were kids, so we couldn't understand and really comprehend the difference. But visually, you would see like me and my sister, our parents dressed us up. We had structure. We couldn't play outside all night, where our other friends that we grew up with, they could do whatever. They kind of looked, they weren't not washed up before they went out to go play. Not to be mean, but these are just the visual
Mhm.
things you can say. And it's like, people are like, well, your parents are mean and you can't do all this, that, and the other. But, there's the structure there that we're kind of taught. You don't need to be outside playing at 10:30. It's dark or whatever, because stuff could happen, and stuff has happened. And we're like, oh, well, luckily we were in the house. Now, of course, we wanted to go out and play, but we had the structure there. And then as far as education, we were put in, luckily, better schooling versus, just a public, low rank school. We went to better schools in the city and state. But I think that also came from the dynamic of our household, where we had parents that saw, okay, we didn't have these opportunities. We can do this to be better. And we're together, so we can say, let's send our kids to this school. Let's make our kid try to play an instrument. A lot of this stuff we didn't want to do. But like you're saying, as now I reflect on it, like you're saying, it built us up better. We had more skills. We even dabbled in taking a foreign language, playing an instrument, all these different things where you see is like the single parent household. And I grew up with a lot of kids and had friends like that downstream growing up. They had a lot of whole different opportunities that weren't allotted to them for whatever reason. Maybe it was a financial or the parent just didn't think that way that ours did. But
Right.
the structure is a huge difference, and that structure carries out to follow forward through the rest of your life, whether it's education wise, our work ethic wise, and even relationship wise. Because again, how you were saying how a lot of single men will get in with women and look at it as, okay, this woman is going to give me sex, money, spare time, her car, let me live at her house for free, do all this stuff because that's what mom replicated. And then I'm in the opposite household. I don't look at it, as like my mom's supposed to do everything for me. And if she doesn't do it, it's a problem. Like, for instance, jokingly with my relationship, I don't ask for nothing because that's like if I'm supposed to do that, like I was taught, be a man, you're supposed to be able to do this for yourself. I would have to be, falling down a cliff to ask for something. So
Right.
that
Right.
structure and what we're taught and the dynamic, it's night and day. And you can see visually too, even as we're growing up, the difference there. So it's a complex spider web, and there are two way different webs of how they grow up, rather the single dynamic and then the nuclear dynamic, which I was blessed and lucky to have. And it goes on beyond this.
So let me ask both of you guys, when you were coming up and things that our parents told us not to do, you couldn't stay outside till 10:30 playing, so on and so forth. Did you understand at that point why? I mean, did you look and say, well, dang, I don't know why I can't be out there playing with them?
No, I didn't at first because, you got, can you come outside and play? Can you come outside and play? And it's
Mhm.
like, no, because I had it, my parents was like, I know what his mom or dad does for a living. You can't play with them. And of course, I'm 7. So I'm like, I don't know why I can't play with you, but my mom says no, my dad says no. So, I can just wave at you out the window. So, I kind of knew like, oh, his dad does this and my dad doesn't want me influenced by that.
So your parents told you what other kids' parents were doing?
Yeah, I knew of it a little because I grew up, a lot of one of the neighborhoods we grew up, a lot of the, I guess, parenting fathers sold drugs, whatever, et cetera, or were illegal. So I was the one nuclear family. There were a couple others, but the majority of the younger families, dads were selling weed, et cetera. And, they had kids. So the only kids I had were the kids, that dad sold weed. So my parents like, I don't know if I want you going over their house, So there were barriers set up and I didn't fully understand.
Mhm.
I just looked at it like, well, his dad sells weed. I don't care. I just want to play PlayStation. But now, as I look back at it now, okay, I see why you didn't want me going over there because, osmosis.
Mhm.
See, but the difference in between our generation and yours is, number one, mom didn't tell us what
Mhm.
their parents did. They knew,
Yeah.
but you know what she said. You can't go over there. Ask why if you want to. Didn't want to do that.
Yeah,
You just you just
Yeah.
did what they told you to
There-
do.
There was
And
an
later
explanation.
on, as we reached those formative years, you started finding out things, for me, and Carl and I didn't grow up in the same neighborhood, but we knew the same people.
Gotcha.
And we knew, because by the time somebody was 10, 11, 12,
Mhm.
middle school, we knew certain people we didn't hang around with. But I think for me, speaking as a product of a single parent household, my mom and dad got divorced when I was 5. Wouldn't necessarily call dad an absent father. He just wasn't in the house, but he was always accessible.
Gotcha.
My mom, God rest her soul, was everything to me. I owe who I am today to my mom. I always pay homage to her. And it was difficult for her to man both sides. She was a mom and a dad.
Yep.
My mother was a very strict disciplinarian. And I always fall back on, Carl, you and I have talked about this. Parents in the 70s, we as children had a healthy dose of fear of our parents. So if they said not to do something, I'm not even giving it a second thought. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to ask why, because we realized that they had our best interests at heart.
Yeah.
And while I say fear, some people may not like that term, but to me, fear is a byproduct of respect.
Agreed.
So my mother, even though she passed in 2004, my siblings and I still have that healthy dose of fear. So, I think one of the things that hurts us now, especially in single parent households, a lot of times parents want to be friends with their kids. I tell all of my kids, my boys and my daughter, especially my boys, I don't give a damn about being your friend. I'm your parent. We can be friends later on down the line.
Yeah.
Or if we never be friends, I'm fine with that too. But my job as your parent is to instruct, to guide, to discipline. But for the single parent households and these mothers out there, I understand that they're playing dual roles, but trying to be, in this case, young Black male, trying to be his friend, it's not something that's going to work.
hurts.
Because you hinder them. You hinder their growth, you hinder their maturity. And while we're speaking about growth, let me ask you, Carl, what would your definition of growth be? Human growth, that is.
Um, being able to see a situation and you're looking at it at one way, and then you say, okay, as I learn more, as I experience more, as I talk to more people, I can evolve in certain thinking. One of the things that, and this came up a few days ago. We have a thing at work. We have like an icebreaker, and somebody was like, "What's your favorite book, and why?" And mine is the autobiography of Malcolm X. Now, depending upon, and everybody was looking at the Bible, and I'm like, okay, the Bible, yes, but
Yeah,
I don't
I get
necessarily
it.
look at it as a book.
Yeah.
It's more, life structure, but that's a whole nother topic.
Oh, yeah.
But when I said the autobiography of Malcolm X, of course, I'm not in a very diverse environment, so my eyes kind of went up.
Yep.
But what actually I love about that book showed growth. He evolves through the book. And if he had been allowed to live longer, I think that evolution would have continued, that growth would have continued.
Agreed.
We saw the same thing, and Martin Luther King's image has been co-opted, which is a whole nother topic. But you saw the same evolution and growth in him later in life. Now, both of those men died when they were 39 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So they were still young men.
Learning, yep.
And I think that, but at that age of 39, they had lived several lifetimes and had lived, through a lot of different situations, met a lot of different people, had been exposed to a lot of different things, and they embraced the growth. I think what we're seeing in this generation in particular, people are not looking to grow. They're looking to obtain.
Fair.
So, whether it be money, whether it be women, whether it be possessions, it's like, how can I get this rather than how can I evolve? How can I become a better person? How can I become a better partner, husband, spouse, all of that. So, my definition of growth would be just like continuing to learn, and it's a lifelong process.
Exactly.
Okay. Brandon, what would be your definition of human growth?
Human growth, kind of like Carl was saying, I look at it as just growth period is a curve, right? And looking at curves, technically, if they're ascending, they don't end. So that's what I look at as growth. So whether it's financial knowledge, biblical knowledge, relationship knowledge, life knowledge, you can all slam that on a curve of life that goes up. And from your 10-year-old range, 20-year-old range, 30-year-old range, that curve is going to go up. Like you were saying, if you're clipped at 39, that curve only goes to here or whatever point 39 is. That's just a curve that keeps growing. You hear people, I work with guys that are at retirement age. They're still saying, I'm learning this. I learned this yesterday. That curve is going to go until we go down in the ground. So I look at it as growth is just riding out the learning curve of life. And you're never going to be done. And that's like Carl saying, people just want to reach whatever the top of said curve is. There is no top because you can't learn anything. You can't just have a peak. There is no peak. And if you want to get to said peak, then you're not doing yourself a favor. You're going to hinder yourself because someone else is going to want to grow more. And if you're in a partnership, relationship, or work-wise, you have to continue to keep growing. This world is evolving day by day. People are evolving. We have AI now, so who knows what that's going to evolve us. So growth is that curve we've got, and it's going to it needs to keep going. It's not going to keep going. It needs to keep going.
Okay. The reason I asked is looked up, of course, the definition of growth. Growth is the art or process of a manner of growing in size or stage of development. So, Carl, to your point about evolving, I think that, falls perfectly in line with that. I also think that, anytime we're talking about growth and or maturity, it's subjective, but at the same time, as an evolutionary process, I think it's positive. It's something that we definitely need. For me, growth can only take place when, we look at ourselves in the mirror and we're able to say, damn, I was wrong. You know, when
Mhm.
you're able to, for instance, put others before yourself, growth. To me, a telltale sign, and this is from personal experience, a telltale sign of growth is when you have somebody close to you that notices that growth. When they
Mm.
say, hey, you're not doing such and such, or I notice you talk differently now, you walk differently now.
Mhm.
Um, i.e., our wives, our significant others, you know, family members. To me, that's a telltale sign
Exactly.
of you know, you growing. And of course, you know, growth to me, growth and maturity are kind of hand in hand because both take place over time.
Mhm.
You know, maturity is not something that is, in my opinion, innate.
Mhm.
You know, some people our age have the mentality of what, 18, 19-year-old.
Mhm.
You know, as sad as that may be. But I think, you know, when we're talking about maturity, you know, it's something that we have to aspire to
Yeah.
that point. One of the good things that I like about, you know, what we're doing is we're all not like-minded in everything, but we've got a good think tank. We're positive. And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
with our discussions, we're just trying to inspire folks to change. You
Exactly.
know, and while some of these brothers out here may feel hopeless, may feel lost, you know, I'm speaking directly to you guys, you know, there's an opportunity, you know, surround yourself with guys that are doing things, not necessarily, you know, financially successful, but guys with good heads on their shoulders, because
Yeah.
that's going to help you in your process of growing, of developing, of maturing. You know,
Mhm.
for instance, I'll say here, the definition of maturity per Psychology Today. Maturity is defined as the behavioral expression of emotional health and wisdom. It is the capacity to know one's own emotional experience, to be oriented by this experience to some aspect of the truth, to place this truth within the context of other truths, and finally, to act in accordance with one's values. So, what does that mean to you?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because when you said what was the definition of growth, thought you were going to say what is the definition of maturity because people have different definitions, and that was
Mhm.
one of the things that was in my head when we first started talking about this topic. I said, well, how would we define
Mhm.
maturity? Because it's that definition from Webster's is not the definition that a lot of people have.
Yep.
Right.
Um, and I always go back to two things I fall back on. One is the quote from Frederick Douglass where he says, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Um, and I kind of flip that into my own, you know, life lesson where I always say, I'm not raising adults. I'm not gonna go to a grown man and try to tell him, you know, how to change his ethic in
Mhm.
life because he's gonna look at me like, well, who are you to tell me that?
Fair.
Right.
You know, and I'm grown. I've been doing
Mhm.
this, even if they're 20, even if they're
Yep.
25. And I said, well, you know, I've been doing this a little. Man, you ain't got it. So I don't. I think that it's very important that we look at that definition of maturity and kind of internalize it, and it should be across the board. It should be
Fair.
this
Mhm.
is
Yep.
you're mature or you're not.
Oh yeah.
Um, Again, like I said, obtaining things doesn't make you mature. Age definitely doesn't make
Mhm.
you mature.
Right.
It's really having a framework of responsibility, growth,
Yep.
and being able to, you know, show that. One thing I do want to say though, and I don't want to. This might go a little bit different, but
Mhm.
we talked a lot about nuclear households, single parent households.
Mhm.
I think that growth growth that you saw that you talked about with the increase of single parent households. What's disturbing to me in that growth is those children have fathers.
Yeah, I do.
To me, a lot of times those fathers are immature because you've got women who have multiple children, not situations where parents got divorced, dad moved out, Mom is raising the kids, dad comes around, and
Mhm.
or they could be shared custody. He could, whatever. But like you
Yeah,
said, your
got
dad
you.
he's not an absent father. He's there.
Mhm.
You can talk to him. You can reach out to him. A lot of times now, these women talk about, it's just me and my kids. Where is the dad?
Yeah.
Where, and it's like that particular man. Obviously, if he's not there for his children, if you have children that say they've never met their father, and he's alive, he's not incarcerated,
Yep, we're
he lives in the
deceased.
same
Yep.
city, and I'm saying, how, as a man, do you not want to connect with your child? And then again, that's just showing immaturity. And I've seen people as old as myself, and going and talking to their father for the first time, or for the first time in
Yeah, first
30 or
meeting.
40
Yeah.
years. And, and they're going, well, I didn't know how to be there for you. Well,
And that
Mhm.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Carl, because one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is a situation where you may have an absent father, but it may not be the fault of that father. So if you've got a female that's got multiple kids by multiple men, a lot of times what happens through personal experience, let me say,
Mhm.
the mother is mad at the father. Therefore, she feels like, I'm going to hurt you. I'm not going to allow you to see your child.
Yep, creating a rift.
And what you don't realize, ladies, for those of you that are in these situations, when you do that, you're only hurting the kid.
Mhm.
You're not hurting that man, because ultimately that man is going to get to a point where we're like, you're not letting me see my kid. I give up. And fellas, that's one thing we can't do. We have to continue to fight. You have rights. Just because, even if you're not paying child support, doesn't mean that you don't have rights. A lot of times that time is more important than that financial stability that you may be offering that mother. And I think back to my own personal situation, Carl, about that.
Mhm.
Brandon, audience, I have a son, my oldest son, and didn't find out about him till some years after he was born. Well, his mother and we tried. I went to court, established child support, had visitation, the whole nine.
Mhm.
Well, now my son is 22 years old, and I haven't seen him in some years. I don't necessarily call myself estranged, but at the same time, I have continuously fought to try and see him. He's an adult now, so it's up to him.
Got it.
But there are situations, where the dad wants to be there.
Mhm.
And while my father wasn't in the household, again, love my dad to pieces. Dad, rest in peace. But my mom took on such a strong personality with me and my siblings. I don't think I missed out on too much. I had friends coming up that had nuclear families, and thank goodness for my close friends, I'm a part of their family. I feel like it.
Mhm.
Carl's dad, my first real job, he was there. I asked him, it was the same position he had had for years. So I went over to the house. We sat down, we chopped it up. He gave me some advice, and I love Carl's parents, So again, I say, men, we've got to surround ourselves with people that are conducive to positive things. People that will give you that constructive criticism, because that's a lot of times these younger men coming, they don't want to hear that.
Nope.
Constructive criticism, man. Oh, you hating? I'm not hating, young man. I'm trying to help you.
Yeah.
And even as a father now, I find myself telling my other boys, the things that you're going through, I've been there. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, if you're surrounded by people that are enabling you, you don't have a chance to grow. You don't
Nope.
have the opportunity to mature. So I would say, for me, if there was one thing that maturity and growth mean to me, it's peace.
Mhm.
Fair.
Because you get to that point, once you're mature and you're starting to mature, where you can handle any situation and don't worry about it, whether you have control of it or not, you realize, hey, it is what it is.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that, you don't care about it. It just means that you found that peace. And Lord knows, the Bible speaks on it. But we've got to make it a mission of ours to really start talking to these young men. And fellas, if y'all watching, get yourself some real friends. Not your boys who want to hang around and smoke weed, so on and so forth. Some real friends that's going to tell you whether you're wrong or whether you're right. Those are the people that you need in your life. And Brandon, I don't know if you can attest to this, but I know that coming up with my friends, Carl and I, we've got friends that we're all kind of like the same thing. We get together now and it's like we 13 all over again. But we're not afraid to call each other out because we have to take accountability for that, and even at 53, if somebody tells me something, I'm mature enough to understand and recognize whether or not it's a good thing, whether or not they're right or they're wrong.
Yeah.
So I never go into a situation saying I'm right and I hold on to that. Because, Carl, to your point, that's a sign of immaturity.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So, I mean, for you, Brandon, how has that path been, your path to growth and maturity? Because again, as you said before, it's an evolving process.
Exactly.
I want to add on to that question too.
Load me up. What's up?
Why, and speaking to your generation,
Go ahead.
where does that lack of maturity come from? Or where does that come from where you're not that, and I'm not saying you or,
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm making a generalization.
Broad statement.
But younger
I got you.
people are not open to wise counsel. Let's just say that.
So going back to the definitions we had, the biggest thing that I see, the one word that can really wrap it all up is wisdom. And wisdom is not something you have out the gate. You're not born wise. You don't buy wisdom. You can't just Google it, YouTube it. You gain it over time and through osmosis, through constructive criticism, surrounding yourself with wiser people, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a big part of it too. A lot of people that I grew up around are friends of my age. I'm the old man of the group and I have no problem with it. But I was lucky to have, how my parents were, my work situation. I'm the youngest at my job. Everyone I work with is like 60 or about to retire. So through that osmosis, again, I got a lot of wisdom versus my friends that were working with a bunch of teenagers and I'm working with 50-year-olds when I was young in college. It accelerates the process. So I was blessed to be in a situation where I could just take on a lot of wisdom at a young age, and a lot of people don't, but I'm able to kind of see like there's a lack of wisdom, and a part of wisdom is constructive criticism, being able to say, this is the wrong way. You don't do it this way. And it's also from the household, some people are not given, like we were talking about with single parent, a lot of times, not all the time, I can't speak for it, but you are enabled in those situations where either it's a single mom or a single dad, you're just going to say, I want to be his friend. I don't want to, hurt his feelings or whatever. So again, that's your environment growing up, now you're out in the world in adulthood, you seem to be enabled all the time. You're not going to let you come up and say you're doing this wrong. You're able to make it work for X amount of time. Constructive criticism is like talking Japanese to me. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's for. I take it as offense, etc. So I think the biggest disconnect is a lack of wisdom. And there's this the hard part to get to wisdom, because you can't just get it. You have to gain it through whatever means. And again, it's like the money thing. You just want money. You look on social media or you see the one guy that has tons of money and you just say, like the commercial, it's mine, I want it now. It doesn't work that way. You have to either buy smarts, get a job, hustles, whatever you got to do. You've got to climb the ladder to get to that. And again, it's that disconnect. You have a lot of people that I've grown up with in my generation. They're like, oh, Brandon, you're doing well for yourself. I don't think I'm doing well. I joke and say, Elon Musk has all the money. I'm broke, And then someone like, no, you're not. You're loaded. And I'm like, no. But it's just, I saw opportunities and I was wise enough to go this path versus this one. And I'm like, we're the same age. You can do this too. You could have done anything. You could have been better than me. You could go be a heart surgeon. I know people I went to school with that are doing excellent career paths. I know some people, I haven't seen them in years, but they're probably doctors now. They're probably doing surgeon residency. And, maybe they had the wisdom from their parents that might have been like, go do this, what others didn't, and add the constructive criticism of a mentor. And that's another thing, which I can go down the rabbit hole of mentorship. That's another thing, even if you don't have that, nuclear or even just the good dynamic self, mentorship can go a long way. And through mentorship, you gain wisdom because you have somebody with the wisdom coming to this young person saying, like you were mentioning, I've been here before, I've done this. These are the ways to navigate versus how I joke and sometimes say, I learned by bumping my head. And a lot of time I say I'm a product of that generation where I did some learning bumping my head, but you got a lot of people, that's the only way they learn and gain whatever amount of wisdom is by bumping your head. And you look at a baby, yeah, that baby might have a knot on his head, but he's not going to, run into the wall and run through the house. But would you rather just say, don't run in the hallway or walk around seeing a baby with 4 lumps on its head? So,
And see that's important because real quick, if you talk about mentorship, for me, it doesn't mean somebody that's educated. It just means somebody with experience.
Mhm.
We've been around some OGs that have given some knowledge that you can't gain from a book.
exactly.
I know for me, Brandon, you mentioned, people talk about, well, you've reached this height, you're doing good for yourself. I remember when I graduated my undergrad
hmm
degree, gave it to my mom, and it was the happiest day of her life. But for me, I'm saying to myself, now what?
Yeah.
Because I didn't do it for her, but it was because of her that
Yeah.
I reached
Yeah.
that point. So I think that a lot of things that we do, quote unquote, the path to success, it's because of how we were raised.
hmm
I didn't think twice about not going to college. It was just a question of where I was going to go. Granted,
Exactly.
neither of my parents attended college,
hmm
but because of my circle of friends, we all did the same thing.
Yep.
That we had this competitive nature, and that's when I'm talking about, surrounding yourself with good folks. Where if I got a B on the test, and Carl or Dave or whoever got an A on the test, they gonna clown me. Oh, you got a B.
Mhm.
So guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna study. So next week I can clown them because
Yep.
I got a higher grade.
hmm
But I mean, that competitive nature, it fuels us. And again, a lot of things are second nature, but it begins at home. And again, even if you're in a single parent household, you can still be successful.
Exactly.
So
Definitely.
Brandon, my question real quick is, how do you talk to your grimy friends? Because I know you got some grimy friends. So how
Yeah.
do you talk to them?
An easy way, and it was a tough process because some of those grimy friends I was close with years ago, I had to realize, like, okay, these are the friends that are, like you were mentioning earlier, who can give me that constructive criticism versus the ones that'll enable me or in that negative way. I had to, cut those cords there. And it was tough to do because, I had some friends like, oh, I'll talk to you all the time, but it's generally not positive. Versus this friend, I had some friends, one of my good buddies, Al, I was in a relationship that a lot of people didn't approve of. And he was one of my few guy friends that said, this ain't it, Brandon. And, me, Mr. Bump my head, I was like, yeah, you sure? But I remember, I saw my mom. My mom was like, you shouldn't have did that. And I was like, no, Al is one of the ones with you, He had my back. That's a good friend that, doesn't enable me. He says, let's sit down and talk about this. You shouldn't be doing this, or you should be doing this, or this is the right thing. But those friends that would enable and were the negative, I looked at it like time is valuable, and I really don't want that, in my nucleus of stuff. So I had to get rid of that. I wasn't being mean. I just had to fade to black, hide into the bush. But it does you better because the few friends that I do have, those are people I know that I could say, hey, I got a problem. And they won't just pacify me. They will give me, this is the real deal. And some of my friends are older and younger than me. So I definitely have that casualty. Like one of my buddies is in his mid-30s. So he's seen a little bit more and he's still relatively close to me. So that's cool. He's like,
Got it.
I've been around, done that. That's not cool. This is cool. But as far as the negative side, I definitely had to do some cutting the branches. And it was hard in the beginning because like, oh, this is a buddy you could text or chit chat with about the game. But if we're not talking about football, it's not really helping me out. So I think I had to do some searching to level out the playing field for myself.
And for maturity, and we talked about this, there's no ceiling to it. There's no age range to stop it.
Mhm.
And when you're talking about that, I had a conversation with a friend of mine from high school the other day. And we've been friends since high school. And we talk infrequently, but you know, we're starting to kind of reconnect now.
Gotcha.
But one of the reasons is he was saying that, you know, he's kind of lost a lot of friends because they weren't on that growth path.
Yeah.
And
Happens.
he was giving me an example of one guy that he grew up on the block with. He's known the guy pretty much since they were, you know, 5-6 years old.
Mhm.
We're in our 50s now, and life is starting to happen. And he said his grandmother, who's elderly and she's going through some health challenges, the guy still lives on the same block as the grandmother. And he was saying, you know, like, if I can't get over there, could you, you know, kind of look out for Granny, you know, shovel the snow or, you know, do whatever.
Mhm.
My man, he's too busy to do it. You know, I don't have time. He said, but then I look and he's doing other things. He's out, you know, he's putting it on social media. He's out with coworkers. He's doing this and the other. And he's like, this is, you know, if we're friends, you would do that. He said, so I pretty much, you know, I just don't, he's like, you know, I don't have hate for him, but I realize we're not going to rock with each other anymore. And I said, well, yeah, it's different when people, you know, grow up. And he said, you know what I realized was he never was my friend. And it took me this to realize it. He was just a guy that I was associated with because of proximity. And he said, I started looking over life where whenever I would reach out to him for whatever reason, he would not show up. He said, but there are times where he reached out to me and I did show up. He said, so I'm looking at that. And it took him, you know, 40 years to realize it. But it was like, it becomes an epiphany when, like I said, when life starts to happen, it's like, wait a minute, let me think about this relationship. And I think that showed a level of maturity that a lot of people don't have. They won't cut those friends off. Yeah. They won't, and, you know, they won't even recognize that they were just, you know, proximal relationships.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, they'll just be like, oh, that's my friend. And how could they do that to me? And it's like,
And just to piggyback, there are part of that cut and branch process. That's something I realized too. And a lot of people don't realize this because I know people that do it. You have friends that you quote unquote vent to, right? And that's then proximity. I went to school with them. You know, we lived around the corner for each other. So, you know, it's like I can call Joe whenever I had a rough day. I need to vent. But when you don't have Joe to talk about, when it's only good things, you don't have much to talk about with Joe. But Joe's always there when the roof's caving in, the plumbing's going out on the house, the car breaks down. Joe wants to hear that, and he thrives off that. And unfortunately, not everyone's like that, but we're all going to have people in our life that are like that, that can feed off of that. But once you say, hey, Joe, I got a new car. Hey, I got a new house. I got a promotion. Then Joe's like, oh, okay. But let you tell Joe, you know, me and my wife got into a fight. Joe's all in for 2.5 hours. So that's a part of it too, where you've got to realize, like, it might take some years. You know, it took me years to realize some people, like your buddy you mentioned, it took him 40 years. But there are people like that. And those are branches we have to watch and pay attention to, because I was able to catch some of that years out. But unfortunately, some people take decades to do it. But I think if we can wheel that out and cut it out soon, it'll help us in the long way too, as far as friends and you knowing who's actually there for you.
Right. And it's important too, because think about it. Kids, when they're 4, 5, 6, everybody's their friend.
Yep.
Yes.
The whole neighborhood.
Everybody is their friend. And to your point, Carl, maturing means being able to get to the point where you recognize you're not my friend. And it's okay.
Yeah.
But a lot of times with, you know, folks that are coming up, you know, because they've been around certain things, it's difficult for them to let those things go. And since we're talking about, you know, absent fathers, single parent households, a lot of times if mom is doing the very best that she can, she may not have the best people in her sphere. So therefore, the kids are seeing this. You know, I wanted to drop kick this little 4-year-old girl the other day. She out, we in the grocery store, she twerking.
Oh boy.
But then you look at her mother, she dressed just like mom's dressed. And you know, even with my 5-year-old daughter now, she knows there are certain things that
Yeah.
Daddy's
As
not
she
playing.
should. Yeah.
As well as, her mom, my wife, she don't play.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for us to recognize that, we're not saying that single parent households are dysfunctional.
No, not at all.
I think
Nope.
I'm a product of a very successful one. But I do think it's important to recognize that both parents have a say. And if that father is absent, more times than not, it's on the father for them being absent.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But in the situations where it's not on them and it's the mom that's keeping the kid away from the father, it's an accident waiting to happen. I think that men, we have to be careful of who we dealing with.
Exactly.
Because BBD said it. You can't trust a big button to smile.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make sure, and we're thinking with the big head, because
Yeah.
that little one will get you in
A
trouble
whole lot of
every
trouble.
time.
Yeah.
And once you have a kid with somebody, you have a lifelong bond with that person. And again, maturity and growth dictates that it's up to you how you handle it. So, I want, us to all have some takeaways from today's show. So, Brandon, I'm going to ask you, what do you feel is the solution to our men that have come from single parent households where we have had this sometimes unfairly perception put upon us that we're not growing, we're not mature? What would be your solution?
For me, the best solution, and again, it's, I'm not can't one prescription to fit all, but my best bet, what I would say, is if the situation for a single parent household is not producing productive results as is, mentorship. Whether it's career mentorship, church mentorship, or just a guy down the street who's got it together, you need that osmosis of productivity, efficiency, what to do and what not to do, and to get you on a path to get to where you want to be. And if you don't know, that's fine, but maybe you can assimilate from what you've seen out of productive situations via this mentor, because you can go down the stats and look up so many successful people that have had mentors, or so many successful people that are mentors, because they know what that can and what it will do for people. And again, I came from a nuclear parent household, but if I didn't have mentorship, I don't think I would have been in the position I'm in now. So I could say, if I was in a single parent household, if I didn't have mentorship outside of my household, it wouldn't have propelled me. So I think that's a great tool that a lot of people don't seek out, and or maybe even have access to. And maybe that's on the people that are ahead of themselves now. And if we can mentor, maybe we need more mentors, and maybe that would help in reverse order. So I think mentorship is a great prescription to help.
Okay. Carl, what's your solution?
Really along that line as well. I think that men have to be more involved in young men's lives. The one thing I'll say is what we were talking about. I don't want to say that, the single mom, like you said, single mom can't raise, a strong male child. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, if that father is around, that father needs to be in that child's life, whether it be a boy, girl, it doesn't matter, but particularly for a young man. If the father is absent, then there needs to be other men to pour into that child. The mom has to be open to, introducing that.
Yeah.
You can't say, well, this is my baby and I'm going to raise my baby the way I want. You need some input. If it's not going to be from the father, it needs to be from somebody else who's trusted, who has wise counsel. Eugene, referred to it earlier, the OGs. I was blessed to be around older. I had grandparents. I had older uncles. I had people on the street that you learn things from, and it's all not necessarily, go to work and work hard type of thing. Had an uncle tell me when I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, only drink top shelf liquor. I had no clue what that meant until I got to old, and I said, "Oh,
Makes sense.
This
Makes sense.
You know what I'm saying?
You ain't drinking the rot good.
Right, you know, and I'm going like top shit. Had my grandfather tell me at an early age, we sitting around playing cards or whatever, and you know, me and my brothers, and my brother had a card that he had hid somewhere and he brought it out. Grandfather went ballistic. You don't cheat. Don't you ever cheat when you're playing cards. And I'm, you know, going
Lesson
like,
learned.
what's going on? Well, found out later, you know, somebody got killed. That it was like,
There you go.
oh, these are life, you know, and like
Mhm.
I said, these are things that you just carry with you as
Yeah,
a,
yeah.
and a lot of people, you know, nowadays don't, you know, get that.
Mm.
Or that's why I asked the question earlier, are not receptive to it. But I think that men need to if you're raising a child, if you're in a nuclear household, that man needs to be mature enough to know, okay, I have to raise this child.
Exactly. Yep.
If there's a single parent household, the mother has to be mature enough to know I do need some input
Mhm.
because I can't teach them everything from a male
Yeah.
perspective.
It takes a village.
It takes a village. And you know, when you have parents that, you know, a mother that won't let the son and won't let the father see the child, or the child doesn't, I mean, the father doesn't come see the child, you know, as you said, Eugene, that's only hurting the child.
Yeah.
And you've got adult children who, you know, can't stand their mother because they kept them from the father,
Yep.
or they can't stand the father because the father never came around.
Mhm.
And those relationships, you know, as we talked about earlier, they can be in their 40s and 50s and they're still trying to reconcile that behavior.
Yep.
And
That's a
you
big
know,
can of worms.
and again, I got personal experience with that too. I have friends that are like, you know, they don't even want to talk about their mother, or they don't even want to talk about their father.
Yeah.
And it's like that hurt, it doesn't bode well for the next generation because when they have children,
Yep.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
it's it's
The
it's a
cycle
cycle.
it's a
continues.
cycle.
It's a cycle, and I think it's important. So, to wrap this up, Brandon, your point is we're looking at mentorship, Carl, parental involvement, moms, single parent households being able to allow their sons, their children, to be mentored
Mhm.
by other folks in the family, whether it's an uncle, organizations, Boy Scouts, the church, so on and
Neighbors,
so
yeah.
forth.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I'll say, to add to the two things that you guys talked about, is if you find yourself in a situation to where, you know, you feel like you're not growing, you feel like you're not maturing, surround yourself with men that can help. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's highly educated, but these are men that will breathe, you know, success into you. One of the
Mhm.
things that I've learned is persevere. No matter what, persevere. 'Cause it's harder to get that momentum back if you just throw your hands up and say, you know, the hell with it, I give up. You know, where you may be moving at a jogger stride, you know, an obstacle hits you, now all of a sudden you're taking baby steps. At the end of the day, you cannot give up. So again, we're sitting here offering our perspective in hopes that it will inspire change. So thanks everybody for joining. See you guys next time.